Going to kick off the recording here. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time to join for our session today. This is our monthly Iowa 21st Century Community Learning Centers directors meeting. Lots to cover. It's hard to believe it's almost summer. My kids are ready for it. They've got their last week of school. Technically, next week, only it's 2 days, so it's not even a full week. So this week was kind of their last week. So I know many of you have summer programs, so hopefully you're kind of ready for those and things are ramping up. Um, yeah, we're still trying to figure things out in our house, kind of what's going to happen this summer. But lots to kind of go through. So we'll just kind of jump right into it. As usual, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat box. Or just go off of mute and just ask a question. It's fine. If you could put your name and title and kind of who you work with in the chat box, that also helps with attendance. But if you could do that while I begin talking here, that would be helpful. Um, so I think I had mentioned right around the time of our last meeting, I was getting ready to head out to Washington, D.C. For an annual State Education Agency SEA directors meeting. And this was a collection of states. I want to say there were 20 or 30 states from across the nation, and essentially my counterpart or counterparts for some states like California, who have a massive budget and massive team. Um, they all come together at least once a year, sometimes two times a year, to really get updates from the Federal Department of Education as well as from a couple of different technical assistance groups that provide support in different ways. So we had that 2 or 3 weeks ago, about a month ago. I went out and was able to join for that. There wasn't really any kind of groundbreaking information that occurred. We did kind of grill the US Ed reps a little bit about funding and kind of what we're hearing, and everyone just reiterated that funding is not at risk. No funding has been changed. I know there's been a lot of talk from the president's office with kind of slashing budgets across a bunch of different programs. But just like last year, something to keep in mind that those are just recommendations out of the White House. Congress would still have to review and approve any of those. And this last year, they didn't. They kind of reverted back to normal, and we got funding as usual. I don't have a crystal ball to say what the future is going to hold, but I'm assuming they're going to do something similar because after school programs across the U.S. really stood up, and employers and lots of other groups and said, we really need this funding to help support our communities and our economies kind of as a larger picture, in addition, obviously, to our students and families and schools. So stay tuned for more information on that, but I didn't get any new information out of the group. A couple of interesting things that did pop up, and you've probably heard about. There are a bunch of interagency agreements, or IAA, that have been drafted between different federal agencies. As many of you are, I'm sure, aware, there was an effort to really shutter the federal U.S. Department of Education kind of entirely, but that didn't go all the way through. So it's really a fraction of what it used to be in terms of staff and responsibilities. But some staff have also been moved to other agencies. So staff that oversee the ESEA programs, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, federal education programs, such as the 21st Century Program, Title IV, Part B, those staff are all in the process of being moved from the Department of Education to the Department of Labor. Now that doesn't really impact the funding at all, but we're all kind of waiting to see how it would impact kind of how they support us as a state, and also how that might kind of support you all in different ways. But the reps at the meeting kind of assured us that really the only thing that's changing is kind of the title of who they are employed by. It's the same people, same teams. They're just moving agencies. And then again, that doesn't impact the funding at all. The funding will be overseen. It's kind of confusing in how it's all going to overlay, but I think technical support will still come from a component of the Department of Ed, but funding will be overseen by the Department of Labor, and I'm not entirely sure what it's going to look like. But again, there were no talks about actually cutting or ending funding in any way. They also talked about there is another Title IV program, Title IV Part A, that covers a lot of different things that sometimes there's crossover, so it's supporting student success in different ways. But they're talking about combining Title IV A and 4B support teams at the federal level as well. But again, that would be a state decision on how that would kind of trickle out and how that would support or change support for programs. And we haven't heard anything at the state level if we would do anything similar. I certainly would not want to take on another program. I've got my hands full with just this program, so I'm not advocating to take on any more work at this time. But otherwise, it was a really good meeting. Learning kind of from what other states are doing, going through kind of best practices. There's some things that I kind of learned that I want to try to work in either to our grant competition that we host, that we would open up in the October, November timeframe, or just in how we kind of support you all in different ways. Maybe the types of funding that we use, the types of support, the way in which we support your groups. And we'll talk a little bit about professional development kind of later on here, and I'll get to some of those ideas. But just trying to kind of understand how other states approach things and how we can maybe do a better job here in Iowa. But otherwise, it was a good meeting. It rained almost the whole time I was there, so I didn't get to do a lot of sightseeing. But it was still pretty fun and pretty informative and useful. The Iowa21ccl.com site, as I think I had mentioned before, that site was overseen by the Iowa After School Alliance through a contract that we had held with them for many years. As I had mentioned in previous conversations, that contract ended back in March and was not renewed. That unfortunately is just a department policy or a department decision where we are ending a lot of our external vendor contracts in favor of using those funds in different ways and kind of really attempting to get more money out to groups and out to schools. So we've taken a lot of those duties internally, and the Iowa21ccl.com site is going to go away because that was being funded again through one of those external contracts. So that is set to end here within a couple of weeks. I am in the process of developing a very basic Google site that will look and feel almost identical to what that site was, but that public facing site will no longer exist. So if you're looking for the director meeting recordings, if you're looking for grant archives, if you're looking for any number of resources that were on that site, there will be a new location for you to find those. And I will, of course, share that site with you all once we have it completed. So it's maybe not going to have all the functionality and maybe not look quite as good, but it's going to have the important stuff. It'll still get us from point A to point B. And I'm kind of watching the chat box if there's any questions. Are there any questions about that site sunsetting and kind of going away and what's going to happen with all of the information on it? No? Okay. And then I will of course keep everyone updated once the site ends. I know some of you use them for other things, but I will of course send an email once the site ends. I think it's supposed to close early June, so maybe even June 6th, June 3rd, somewhere around there. So again, within a couple of weeks, unfortunately, I'm still in the process of creating that new site. A couple of updates on our grant awards. So we are running still behind schedule, unfortunately. We generally have the public notice and announcements out to our applicants every year by the end of April. So April 30th is kind of the latest that we tend to look at. We've just run into a bunch of delays internally when looking at contracts, and staff being out of office for vacation and kind of doing things. It's just been kind of a series of setbacks, unfortunately, but we are still in the process and still plan to award funds. It just is taking a much longer time than usual. So I apologize to anyone who had applied. I'm hoping to have announcements out by the end of next week, but I don't really have a specific date in mind. And I know, again, a lot of you are waiting and kind of holding budgets and maybe even waiting on contracts. But hopefully I have news out to everyone within the near future here. So my apologies again on those delays. If you have any very specific concerns or any immediate things, I would say send me an email and I can kind of forward that up the chain to try to further prove my point that we're running behind and we need to make a decision as quickly as possible. So if you have anything, again, if you're I need this by X date or this is going to impact my program because, send those to me. And again, that can maybe help to kind of jolt wherever we've gotten stuck in this government change and government bureaucracy, unfortunately. Any questions on the new grantees, the new cohort that's set to start here in July? Okay. In terms of the renewal awards, so many of you are aware, and I know we've got a couple of our grant recipients that were new last year, but we renew your awards every year, at least for the first 3 years. Generally, between the third and fourth year, we do a comprehensive site visit to determine if you continue to receive funding for an additional 2 years. Those site visits have been a bit on hold because of kind of staffing issues and kind of timing issues. I do plan to do some site visits here, potentially over the summer and the fall. But as of right now, we're planning to renew everyone for the next year. Similar to what we did last year, rather than go through the entire kind of contract renewal process and signatures and kind of going through, I will send you a very basic contract. It will look and feel the same, but I'll just need you to sign it or have a representative from your agency or organization sign it, and then we will upload it into the CASA system like we did last year. You'll answer a series of program assurance and kind of quality assurance questions just to make sure that you fully understand how to use the funds and not use the funds. And then the contract again is kind of runs through some of the guidelines of what you can do and not do and so forth that are federally required that we give to you every year. So it'll be a less formal process than we've done in the past, but again, very similar to what we did last year. I'm hoping to have those out as well by the kind of the end of the month or early June. But as of right now, I'll just let you know that there's no concerns. Everyone is going to continue funding for the next year. Oops, I've got okay, there we go. So no issues there with funding or anything. So anybody that is currently being funded, as long as they're not ending on their fifth year here in June, will continue to receive funding as originally planned and set up for that 5-year contract. Are there any questions about the renewal of funds that would kick in July 1st? No? Okay. Third quarter claims. So those wrapped up. Thank you, everyone. We had pretty minimal issues, I would say. Generally, by the third quarter, everybody's kind of ironed things out. We've kind of fixed things that we saw in the first couple of quarters. So I appreciate your diligence and responding in a timely manner. So I'm happy that those are out. I'm hoping you're all being reimbursed in a timely manner. I know that is sometimes an issue, particularly first quarter. We tend to get really kind of delayed and gummed up. So generally by third and fourth quarter, we've kind of our accounting team is caught up and maybe caught a breath and is getting you out there. If you're running into an issue where you're not seeing funding or if you're just curious, let me know. And I can kind of, again, kind of run something up the chain and kind of ask some questions. Sometimes things get stuck. Sometimes a mail gets, a check gets lost in the mail if you're getting a paper check. These things happen. So if you're not seeing funding and you're getting concerned, definitely send me an email and I'll try to figure out if there's anything going on. But hopefully you're being reimbursed in a decent timeline and not waiting too long. So let's talk about professional development for just a little bit. So a number of you have already sent me your professional development tracking sheets that you've gone through for this last year. So that would be last summer and then fall and current. This is something that we do, excuse me, every year where we just want to see what you're spending your professional development funds on. We obviously see kind of generalized notations, and sometimes we request additional information on your quarterly claims, but we're required to gather a little bit more detail about who the contractor was, what the date was. And that tracking sheet that I attached to the email is very basic. It's just a spreadsheet, kind of who, where, when, what, why, and kind of how. That's something that we need every year to be filled out. I realize the year is not over yet, and you're maybe still getting some technical training, or you're scheduling them for the remainder of this year, so through June. But if you could just do your best to help understand what you're doing and kind of how you're doing it, you can include free, so any professional development like webinars or anything that you didn't pay for on that as well, or things that you partially paid for. So only a partial amount of your funds went into it. Maybe the district paid for a chunk of it, or your organization, so your community-based organization paid for a chunk, and then you use maybe 15%, you covered 15% of the cost. Just note that and kind of let us understand, again, kind of what you're spending your professional development funds on. And I'm hoping to have that. If you could, please have that back to me by the end of next week, so May 29th. I think that's next Friday. Yep. Any questions on the professional development tracking sheet? Okay. If you haven't yet, I've also sent a couple of times a professional development best practices survey. This is just to try to gauge kind of your interest in different types of professional development that we might be able to provide. That's either training that we could provide as the Department of Education, or that we could bring contractors or community partners in, whether to kind of latch on to a monthly directors meeting or like a standalone virtual or in-person training. So I appreciate everyone that has taken the opportunity to fill that out. Very basic, and I appreciate the honest feedback. A group, and I'll maybe try to throw something in the chat box here, but there's a couple of professional development or technical support groups that the Federal Department of Education contracts out with. One is called the Tactile Group, and the other is called NTAC, the National Technical Assistance Center. So if you just Google 21 CCLC Tactile or 21 CCLC NTAC, those should come up. The NTAC group particularly has a lot of really good resources on their website, and even some training modules that are developed specifically for you all as subgrantees. That if in case you're curious and want to kind of learn more about different components of the grant and the federal funding program that supports you all, they've got some really good stuff out there. They also have a lot of support for people such as myself that work for a state agency or that are the coordinators of this funding program. So I take quite a bit of training and attend webinars with their group and that other group, the Tactile group. Those two groups provided a bunch of training at that Washington, D.C. meeting. And I just had a meeting with that NTAC group, and they are interested in potentially providing some virtual training to us throughout the year, and to cover some of those topics that we've identified of interest during that or through that professional development best practices very informal survey that I created. Um, what I like about that group is they can bring some kind of breadth and experience from what other states are doing. So if we're talking about stuff like sustainability, fundraising, marketing, they've got an expertise as like a national technical assistance provider, but their staff have also worked in other states or they've done similar training with other states. So they provide a lot of experience and a lot of background where we can get it. Just they'll say, "Hey, Texas has done this," or "Illinois tried this," and we can learn a lot. They're maybe not going to understand all the nuances or the state rules that we have and how we approach different things, but they can still provide a lot of really good information. So in meeting with them yesterday, I talked about some of the preliminary findings of this PD or professional development survey, and they're drafting up a plan of providing support in different ways. The plan right now, and I don't have an official kind of plan set up yet, but the general kind of blueprint of the plan right now is that we would have them provide some training potentially in person or to kick off a training series during the Impact After School Conference in September. And we'll talk about that here shortly. But during our directors meeting, during the conference or the day before the conference kicks off, we would potentially have them do a little bit of training with you all as a group, maybe the most kind of high ticket items. We could do an in-person training and then potentially monthly virtual training thereafter to cover various topics, and then latch those onto our director meetings. So maybe add an extra half an hour, add an hour on there in case anybody wants to stick around for any different topics that they're covering for that month. And then we just kind of roll that for a year or 6 months or whatever it happens to be. But the idea being that we're covering, again, topics that are of interest or that you've had on the back burner and that we can learn from these industry leading experts on. Are there any questions about professional development plans and what that might look like? No? Okay. We've got a quiet group today. We're all getting ready for the weekend. Um, some good news that I think could be beneficial is if we're providing a stronger level of professional development that could potentially free up some of your funding. So we have that 5% minimum that we require. If we're ramping up and offering more statewide support, I'd be willing to maybe lower that down a bit further. So maybe even like a 3% area from that 5%. So you could direct more of your funding to your students and programs in different ways, particularly if you're attending every month and we're getting some really good stuff. So that decision has not been made yet, but that's definitely something I'm willing to look at. So I would say if you haven't done that survey or if you have a very specific topic, send that to me and I can kind of raise that with the group. Or again, if you've seen other states or if you've got colleagues in other states within your organization or just friends and family and they say, hey, we're doing this. Send that to me and say it'd be cool to do this in Iowa, and we might be able to roll that into a training of some sort, or try to figure out if and how it could work here within Iowa. But that's always something that always looking for examples of what's going well, and then we could provide that to that national group and see if it's something that they can customize or tailor, develop materials, develop resources for us, and then we can kind of figure that out. Very good. The Impact After School Conference. I wanted to talk a little bit about this. So, because we don't have the contract with the Iowa After School Alliance anymore, it might look a little bit different this year. So, I'm still trying to sponsor them, kind of as an exhibitor, as a sponsor. But I'm working with Heidi and her team to try to figure out how we're still involved and doing workshops and so forth. But that directors meeting that we hold the day beforehand, we I'm not sure if we're going to be able to hold it at Drake University, so the conference site, because again, we're not necessarily funding it through that contract with the After School Alliance. We might have the meeting at the Iowa Department of Education building, which isn't really that far from the Drake campus. But something to keep in mind, and I do still want to have a meeting the day beforehand so we can have everybody come in, have face to face, cover some things, or again, some of that training that we might get from a national group, but some things that we can do in person that is always nice to kind of do versus virtual meetings. So I do still plan to have that meeting the day before. It just might look a little bit and look and feel a little bit different from what we've done in the past. I still need to kind of work with Heidi. She might still let us do it on the Drake campus, which is nice, especially if you're staying nearby. But again, it might be at the Department of Education. And if any of you have never been to the Department of Education building, you're in for a real treat. It is very nice. It's an experience, I'll tell you that. So, any questions about? I would recommend registering. Like I mentioned, even though we don't have the contract, I do still expect teams to attend the conference and one member of your team per cohort. So, if you have four cohorts, then I would expect four members of your team. If you only have one cohort, you can still send four members. You can send as many people as you want, kind of within reason. And your funding, of course, is able to cover that cost: registration, travel, food, lodging, all of that stuff. So it's a very good conference. I would say one of the best ways to kind of learn from different groups, and then again to network and kind of get to meet each other and do different things. So strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you attend those and then send different members of your team. Are there any questions about the Impact Conference? Okay. I know last year I was still kind of taking it all in and extremely beneficial, and I learned a ton from just kind of some of the speakers and groups that were there. But I intend to do a couple of workshops again myself, just about kind of 21st century and applications and so forth. Very good. Are there any questions? I went kind of fast. Are there any questions where we want to go back and kind of go over something or something that I did not cover?
Joe, I just had a quick question about the
Mhm.
conference, thinking about logistics. Um, will we have a room block? I just registered only for the conference and I didn't get into any other details that you might have sent out. So my apologies if that was already included.
Um, that's a good question. I don't know if the After School Alliance did a room block just for us in the past. I'll have to ask. I guess I hadn't thought about that. I wasn't sure if the conference itself just had rooms available versus us. But I'll check. Yeah.
Or if anybody else has already gotten that far yet. I just was thinking about it, making those arrangements ahead of time. So looking forward to that. That was really fantastic last year. It was great as a new person to the group to get together with everybody and see it. So looking forward to that again next or this coming year.
Joe, is there still an opportunity for us to bring like some of our community partners that we have to this conference?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. hmm
Awesome.
I would just say if you're bringing like 10 people, like let me know ahead of time. But yeah, onesie twosies, whatever, especially if they're a really good partner. Yeah, absolutely. Bring them.
Awesome. Thank you.
Very good. I just remembered one thing that when I was talking about the third quarter claims, something that I just want to make very clear. So I know I've worked with a number of your groups on technology purchases, which I'm a bit more flexible than we maybe been in the past for purchasing things like tablets and computers and even like 3D printers, kind of cool things. I would say get creative, particularly if you have carryover. And I guess I glossed over the carryover stuff. I didn't even talk about third, fourth quarter budgets. So. Um, I have a technology purchase request form that I can send you. We do need to get that approved ahead of time. So we had a couple of groups that made purchases because they thought it was kind of approved and they maybe had not gone through the appropriate channels and we ran into some issues. So definitely make sure if you're purchasing any sort of technology, so tablets, computers, printers, anything that would qualify as kind of technology, you have to get those approved ahead of time. So if you have a question, submit that to me, and then I'll send you that form. But please do not purchase anything because if it falls too far outside of our kind of qualified boundaries, then I'm not going to be able to approve it, and I'm not going to be able to reimburse you for those purchases. So I would say I'm always ask beforehand if you're ever curious, rather than submitting and kind of hoping that we get it approved. Any questions about technology purchases? Okay. To go,
Joe,
oops, sorry, go ahead. Yep.
real quick, looking ahead to this upcoming fall, are there any tentative, I guess, kind of timelines for a new application coming out?
Yeah, so we're still planning to stick to the basic timeline where it comes out
Okay.
kind of late October, and then it will run through the end of December. So still trying to stick with like a 2 month window, and then providing a workshop at the September Impact Conference, as well as a couple virtual sessions in kind of the October November timeframe for anyone interested. But still planning to stick to the normal timeframe for the conference or for the competition.
Awesome.
Yep. Okay, to swing back to the quarter four budgets, I just kind of glossed right over it apparently. So if anyone is looking at their budgets and realizing they need to kind of move things around, remember that I need to kind of talk with you about that. So send me an email saying that it looks like we're not going to spend all of our funds when we were doing the carryover kind of review. Can I move X amount from this area to this area? I'm generally open to that, but the questions I'm going to ask are, how does it impact your students? Kind of where are you moving it from? Why are you moving it from? So if you have that already kind of queued up in the email, that will help. But my main goal is if we're moving funds around from the original approved application, we don't want to get too far outside of it. And I always want to make sure how is it impacting your students in different ways. And we definitely want to make sure we're not impacting them negatively. And if we're moving large amounts of money, then again, that's something that we may not be able to do, but it's something that I'm willing to talk with you all about. But try to make sure that you're sending that again to me ahead of time. So when I'm reviewing, claims and processes and procedures, I don't go, wait a second, you said you were going to spend 10,000 here, but you only spent like 1,000. Where did it go? You moved it all to transportation. That might have been something that was okay, but we didn't talk about that ahead of time. So just try to keep me in the loop and in that conversation to make sure that we don't run into any issues. And then in that same vein, again, carryover estimates is something that we try to get this time of year, especially now that quarter three is over. You might be looking at your budgets, remaining funds for fourth quarter, and you might be saying, okay, it looks like I didn't spend as much in this area or that area. We generally allow up to 15% total across all budget areas that you could transfer to the next year or carry over. We might have a little bit of flexibility in that if for whatever reason you weren't able to accomplish as much, or you had a vendor, maybe a contract that they quit, so you didn't spend that funding, or there's a lot of things that can happen. Life can happen. But when you send me that carryover estimate, just please kind of outline some of those reasons, particularly if you're over that 15%. If you're not over the 15%, then you don't really need to explain. But just give me those estimates so that we can better understand what your funding awards are going to look like for the next year. That would kick off here in July, and we can start kind of preparing our system and budgets and everything. Um, but please have that to me. I would say the sooner the better. But definitely by the end of next week, kind of let's just try to time it with the end of the month, May 29th, as we start kind of drafting up some of those contracts and trying to figure out again if there's anything we need to talk about and potentially spend down to get within approved kind of budget areas. Any questions about carryovers or fourth quarter budget changes? Okay, very good. I am going to stop the recording and then we can have just kind of an open conversation.